Hey, what's up, everybody? Superfan here with a delayed, um, a very delayed AMA, and I'm recording it. So I've had a ton of technical difficulties today, or starting yesterday. It's just the heat wave's been crazy here. We had a little bit of a pause in the heat for a couple of days, but it's been crazy hot. And my old laptop has been kind of limping as it is. I replaced the fans a while back, and it's like it just couldn't handle the heat. I think that's what's really been the problem, or my SSD is going. But I bought a new laptop, and then I tried to kick off the AMA. But I'm living in between a new laptop with driver issues and nothing installed on it, and the old laptop with everything on it that keeps shutting down. So I think I'm finally set up, and apologies for the delay. And you know what? I think I kind of like that I'm just going to record this anyway because I got to like answer some of your questions ahead of time that require more than a ramble, like an actual thought out response. So that's where we're at. And I'm wearing this t shirt for you guys. Yeah. All right, let's get into it. So before I get into everybody's questions, and there's a lot, and they're great questions, so thank you, everybody. What I'll do is I'm going to quickly go over some roadmap because there were also some general kind of questions or some overlap in your individual questions about features, about who customer is, that kind of thing. And then what I'll do is for the first time, I'll post this to YouTube and then put chapter markers in place for everything, so it's easy to jump around to the different topics and the different answers. I also today, just because I was busy trying to make things work, I went quiet, so I thought it would be good to show you a little bit of dog fooding. So I made a roadmap of features, like no frills, no graphic quality, just default shapes in draw.io.com. It's like an online web flowchart maker, and and then fed that into Flux Context in Comfy UI, which is a visual model that well it includes a visual model, so it understands what it's doing when it comes to image or image to video, which is really powerful because then I could give it something like a skeleton out of draw.io and tell it to make it look like a cyberpunky thing with dramatic lights, and that's what's in the Discord right now. So it took my feature roadmap that looked 2D and plain and made it look pretty, and that's one of our features, or something that's built into doing image to image and image to video. Um, and I just did an image to image of that. So, all right, let me jump in, and I'm starting with probably the weirdest one. I'm going to start with Star Trek. I've talked about it in past videos, and I've talked about why it's important. Pardon. Um, and I think it's still probably weird to anybody who either hasn't heard the original videos or like maybe even still leaves you a little clueless as to why I think it's special. And it's not just because I'm a Star Trek fan myself. Um, and this is one of those cases where I wrote something out, so I'll just read it. Um, what we're doing with Star Trek is a real game, but it's mostly for marketing. So, so when launched, this will be posted on Star Trek related Reddits and a couple of specialty forums. The nice thing is, um, the Star Trek fandom is huge and dedicated, and they can be found in just a few places online. So they're pretty consolidated. Um, this is intended as a live test of what our agents can do for entertainment, and doing this for Star Trek is potentially a large scale. So for this Twitter-based kind of interaction, so we've created 12 characters. Um, they'll be present as chat agents, and with the expected personality and character history of each of these 12 characters. Each day, the script of the film First Contact progresses. That's a Star Trek film. The user can interact with the characters while they experience their own that character's POV in the First Contact storyline as it unfolds. So we've taken the script of the movie, chopped it up a bunch of times, and these 12 characters are playing their role in the movie script as it goes on, and they don't know what's going to happen next. They only know what's happened up to that point. So they're kind of really living it in real time. The individual agents are built. The chat works across Twitter accounts. Chat history is working. The final task to do is to incorporate the Gen AI images to show the context of the chat within the Twitter thread, and that's working on its own. It's just not integrated yet. Why this is important to me, besides something I want to play with, is we're doing some really interesting things with the agents themselves as chat agents that kind of follow a context and are able to talk to each other. And this is almost like a test of what I plan to do with heroes and that storyline, and then do it again for other kinds of IP. And it's important because we're not just wrapping a chat in a rag, a chatbot in a rag. There's a contextual awareness with a story and with each other, and you can surface this by speaking to each of these characters and speaking to them at a certain time in the story. So when we switch over to, say, a hero's context, which is DMT driven, your conversation with them is going to be through the POV of what DMT is driving. And I think that's going to be really interesting. And this could be interesting when it's not on Twitter, when it takes other forms, say games, say other type of media. And then it's something we can apply other IP to. So this becomes, we're in the early stages of it being like its own kind of product, possibly. And, it wasn't a stretch to build it with the tools we have just within N8N, but we're doing some interesting things within N8N to make this kind of stand out on its own. Okay, so that's Star Trek, and that's basically built. It's just missing the Gen AI images, which are also already built but not integrated. So we're very close. I'm gonna kind of try to get through the rest really quickly. I think you know about most of it anyway. The Star Trek one was probably the oddball of the bunch. Okay, AskBiggie. It's a working title. It's kind of sticking at this point, but it can change. It's our deep research agent. You've all heard of Manus, probably. It was China's second DeepSeek moment. When Manus came out, it made a lot of waves. They never got past a huge subscribership, but they got 2 million on the waiting list almost instantly. And the reason they never fully launched to the public is because they don't have the compute. It's really compute heavy. And and another version of a deep research agent is the different tiers of OpenAI. They have a $20,000 deep research agent. That's a month. $10,000 a month and $5,000 a month tiers. I don't know if those are still like in play, those tiers, or if they changed them, but that's the last I knew. That's what they were charging for their deep research. So we're built on a project called Agno. We've tried a few. There's like a few in the running for open source projects that are really capable, and Open Manus was our favorite a while back. But Agno is the one that kind of stole our heart now, and it's because it's pretty easy to give MCP tools to it and really personalize it for our own needs. So, a few weeks ago when alkanes came out, the other research agents couldn't find info on alkanes. So in this one, it's really easy to edit some basic JSON and say, here are sources where you can find specifically out about alkanes, right? So tap and Trac, you could find info on the web. You could find their GitHub. But it's really useful when you can say, hey, deep research agent, you're good at reasoning, you're good at research, but here's some sources. Here's a place to start looking. And so it starts to bleed over into what like something like Perplexity is good at. But we get to manage Agno a little more. There's a little more control there. So yeah, AskBiggie has been running for a while. I kind of that link has been live for maybe 2 months now, but I haven't published it because I really wanted to test it much more, and haven't had a chance. But it performs multi-agent web search as well as search and scrape of resources, as I mentioned. and it's really good at niche context. So we'll, I guess, after a little bit more testing and testing from the community, that's going to be ready for prime time, and and um, and that's that. That's AskBiggie. Tradenoods, also a working title, but it kind of also stuck. Um, we kind of launched it and then found some stuff that didn't work with it. Some of community was playing with it via Twitter, and I got to see where it fell down. So we were able to tweak it, make it better, and then now we're adding AskBiggie to it. So what is Tradenoods? Tradenoods combines three types of agent and outputs a tweet with a link to a web page for a really deep dive with a multi-part answer. So if you tweet at it the way you might with Grok, let's say, right? You can tweet at Tradenoods, and it started out mostly meant to be for trading, but it'll kind of do anything now. And what it does is it gives you a brief answer, um, maybe trying to be funny even a little bit, but then gives you a link because it's creating an HTML file on the fly, and that link has charts. It has all kinds of graphics if it applies, and it has this multi-part answer where it's giving you the results of different types of agents that are doing different search. And Let me check my notes. So it's a multi-agent deep research flow is one. The next is a simpler news agent that reports kind of headlines with links, and a chart scraping agent, which also understands the charts that they're providing. So it doesn't make charts; it's going out and finding ones relevant to your question. And finally, something we're going to add to it is so it's got the Twitter chat agent, but it's also going to be able to scrape Twitter a little bit and be like a Grok kind of. So that's Tradenoods. And for anybody who's played with it before, it's new and improved. That's also like we haven't done hardcore testing. We've been building a lot of stuff and not doing the hardcore testing. So we're gonna do a little more, and then we'll ask community to test it before like really publicizing it. Okay, moving on. The voice agents and the podcast interviews. So we've been through a handful of voice agents that we love, and excuse me, and it's interesting because we get to a point where the models aren't ours, right? And we're fine tuning in some cases, like with Sesame. We had to kind of reverse engineer what we were doing there. Then we switched to some other ones, and we had better voice agents than I've seen elsewhere. And except now, I think the distribution and the quality of 11 Labs is probably kicking ass so hard right now. Like it's really good. But anyway, that such is life. And what we've got now is basically our own voice agents that pass muster with us. We're kind of leaving the door open to be able to switch or choose models because what we're finding is, some have different uh, advantages and do better with different types of emotion. So this is probably something we'll open up to community. But as for the weekly interviews that we wanted to do, and I'm reading again from my notes. Uh, I did a bunch of tests in the past, and they were pretty funny. They were pretty interesting, and anybody who tuned into them or listened to the Twitter Spaces, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So very capable, and they were very capable months ago, right? So they're even a bit better now. And let's see. So launch soon. Yeah, I'm gonna start it this week, probably twice a week. I said weekly before, didn't I? I meant twice a week, and maybe tomorrow. So what I had set up before was different interviewers on different computers. Something I plan to show off so that people can really see that the voice agents don't know each other is an agent. Everybody, as far as they know, are humans on the line, including themselves, and so and that applies to when we bring guests up to the mic. But basically, that was a really interesting experiment because, and I'm doing it all by like audio cables, right? Input to a computer. And funny side fact is, side note is the last time I did an AMA and I screwed up on the audio. The reason I screwed up with recording audio was because um, I had this really complex virtual audio cable driver kind of thing going on, where I had many channels of audio coming in to one computer, and that's how I screwed that up. But anyway, um, I think I shot for being able to do almost like a party line of people, like a bunch of AI talking to each other, and that's still like it doesn't work great because eventually, if I'm not there to guide the conversation starts to get a little repetitive, and frankly, it's kind of uninteresting because they just keep confirming what they know. So so I think doing this twice a week, Twitter Spaces with our voice agent is going to be for marketing purposes, and it's going to be an interviewer and me, or an interviewer again, two interviewers and me, and of course we're always going to have people come up from the audience in the Twitter Spaces to ask questions and maybe even try to stump the agents. Okay, so that's the voice agent. Um, Smallnoodle 179, that's the tax miner. We're going to get to some questions below from you all that are, there was, I forget who asked about that, but let's see, we're going to start marketing that officially in September. And what I mean by that is like trad ads on things like Facebook and Instagram, because that's where the customers of that is actually. It's where like John Deere advertises tractors before tax time, that kind of thing. So we'll have several built and shipped for testing soon before September. And I've already started kind of a 3D resin case to fit the hardware that I chose. So we've already got the hardware. I may have tweeted some photos of the hardware in the past, but it's very small. It's a tiny device, and I'm making a case around it. It's a case that kind of lets you pop multiple cases together, if you want like a tower of these things. So it's our own design in case, but not in the guts of it. The guts are kind of an off-the-shelf computer that we're modifying a little bit. Example, I found that the thermal paste is really shitty out of the box, so one of the things we're doing is we're reapplying thermal paste on each, that kind of thing. So these sell for $4,000 each, and we're essentially selling a $100,000 invoice attached to that, but we collect in actual $4,000 of fiat, and these all contribute to a buy and burn. So that's Smallnoodle 179. Smallnoodle MCP is different. That's something that's a miner on our network that does the MCP tooling for agents, and that's talk more about that later. But I do want to just read off something about Bignoodle's MCP middleware, because I haven't talked about that much in the past, and I realize I'm speaking really fast right now, and just like I'm not even caffeinated. I didn't even touch this yet. But it's because I want to get through a lot, and I don't want this whole video to be like a ramble. But I'm almost done with what you've seen on that product slash feature roadmap, and it's not even complete. But these are the things that we've been actively working on, right? So here's the last one. It's our MCP middleware. So I hope you've all seen the last video I tweeted, which showed Adobe Premiere under agentic control. So that was you know, as one builds and does product design, and as one also watches the market and sees what others, the big fish, are doing, it's important to navigate those waters by picking and choosing where one's strengths are. Like I mentioned in a past video about distribution, or maybe it was just on Discord about distribution. It's hard for us to have a moat in a world where AI is kind of controlled by and owned by the biggest of the big companies, right? So, what does a moat look like? How do we compete with somebody like a Google or an OpenAI when they've got the distribution? It's kind of like a whole startup's business model can be just thrown out the window overnight if Google decides to create a free to use feature on a whim, right? That's the distribution pain point for any startup. What happens when the big fish just kind of like add it as a feature, and your startup's done? So that's something I think about constantly, right? And one of the few ways in which I want to have a really good answer to that distribution and moat question is in this MCP middleware. So when MCP kind of was released by Anthropic, it was amazing. The promise of it is amazing. It gives AI tools use, right? Um, and OpenAI copied and created something called Operator later, but Anthropic first created Claude Desktop, which takes control of your computer. So cool. MCP as a concept is great. Now you have tools use, and that gives a lot of ability to what agents are. But but the approaches weren't great. Like Microsoft got a lot of backlash for saying that they're going to screenshot your computer every now and then so that their AI could know what you're doing. I don't know who at Microsoft thought that would go over well. Um, Cloud Desktop kind of does something similar, but they worded it differently, so it landed differently, and it means it gives you allow it to give control of your computer, but that's also kind of scary because you're giving their AI a commercial, you know, a commercial AI control of your computer with all its, you know, info hidden in cookies and credit card numbers and all that stuff. So that's also scary, even though it's not as scary as the way Microsoft came to the stage with it. And when we saw OpenAI demo Operator, it was kind of not capable of much. Everything they demoed, uh, it showed capability, but it's because they ahead of time gave it things like their credit card info, and this they did the scary stuff. But it's happening in the sandbox where they pre-populated it. It Operator will struggle if you don't give it all this info. So it's an interesting compromise. You have to figure out where this works for a consumer, right? If this is a consumer product, and if it's not, you focus on who your customer is. But in the case of a consumer offering, this is tricky territory that we haven't seen yet, right? So what am I leading up to? I'm leading up to something that we're doing with MCP. It's our middleware, and it gives an almost deterministic control to what we want the agent to have access to. Now, MCP alone isn't that great. There's a lot of software that it can control, but it only goes so far. So, like, some of my first tests was, of course, with software I use. So, I do a lot of 3D work. Uh, I do Unity Game Engine. It was great at making a sphere. It was great at making it red. It was great at putting it at 000 in world space. Couldn't do much more with it. It's kind of like you can't just say make Pac-Man in 3D. You know, you can't tell it to make a game with a simple prompt, and it wasn't even good at anybody at me prompting it step by step. And that's because the software definitions, weren't great. AI is great when you give it very um, a very rich set of details, like a whole library, like the code, like the GitHub, right? Because then it understands how to speak the language of that project, of that library. But when you give it something that's where there is no code, maybe where it's not open source, where there are no API hooks, no web hooks, no way to talk to the software, it just falls flat on its face, right? So the Adobe Premiere demo was special because that software where we don't have source code, we don't have a GitHub, we don't have a way to talk to it via API, and a lot of what it does, it cannot do without a mouse and keyboard. It's a lot of its functions don't exist in pull down menus. You have to actually click somewhere on the screen. So what I came up with is something that might have really big impact, really big implications for this conversation around the future of work, right? So we've got maybe a consumer application, and then we've got this maybe enterprise or enterprise-ish application of MCP, where we're able to control software that people really use for labor, for 9 to 5 labor. And I've called some of these apps boomer apps before because they've just been in use for 9 to 5 labor for so long, like the Adobe Suite, like AutoCAD, like etc. Right? So let me read from what I wrote here, and then we'll be done with the roadmap. Okay, so while many MCP server implementations exist, it's pretty much the Wild West out there. It's difficult to know how well a given MCP definition will work, and there are no standardized naming conventions. So there are many identically named MCPs to choose from. We take a unique approach, creating a UI map for deterministically clicking on UI elements in all the software for mouse and keyboard control. For example, the last video I released showed automated keyboard and mouse control of Adobe Premiere to accomplish Adobe's software features not available via keystrokes, webhooks, API, or other programmatic means. Excuse me. AI is good at learning a software library and creating code, but it has trouble with any software, as in most of the commercial software used in the workplace, which does not expose an API or endpoints. Anthropic and OpenAI have strategies for operator type, quotes, operator control, which, and I didn't mention this before, are expensive to run via your subscription tier and cost many visual model tokens. So, side note, the way Claude does it, for example, it's constantly looking at your screen and using tokens to constantly have an understanding of what's on screen. It knows if there's a button because it's using its visual model, which is expensive token wise, to find the button, understand that there's a button there, and then understand what the button is for in a context of the software. There's some browser use, web browsers that work well with this kind of a setup because it calls out the clickable areas. It calls out images. It's almost like a layer on top of the web page that helps the AI understand what's in the layout. But still, there's an expense here in the form of tokens to be able to know what's on screen in the first place before it even starts trying to understand how it all works. So by creating, and this is back to my text and back to what we're building, by creating UI maps and providing the software in a dedicated Win11 virtual machine, we automate the software in a way which is much more cost and time effective. So that's the other thing. The AI trying to figure all that stuff out also there's some time lag to it. It moves slowly and sometimes very slowly just to find the button and click it. So by creating a UI map and a JSON hierarchy of nested menus and that kind of thing, the software can deterministically know where to click on screen kind of blindly. It's like it just knows the button it's expecting is at these coordinates, so it can click here, but it means it doesn't have to think about that part. It goes and it clicks it really quickly and moves on. And the map is really easy to edit. It's basically the definition for MCP. When the software vendor, let's say Adobe, decides to change their UI and move things around, it's much easier for us to kind of maintain our community, to maintain these maps, because they're essentially PNGs of the software views. So this is much easier to update than to rebuild a set of MCP definitions that have variations all over the net in different MCP servers. So what we're going to end up is with a ton of MCP noise over time, because they're not maintained and they're not standardized, and we aren't standardized, but our stuff's going to be easier to maintain. And so I think this is the unlock to being able to get at that boomer software, right? Get at all the software without APIs, give it an MCP layer in the form of these PNGs and JSONs, and now we've got AI agents controlling those apps. So And I forgot recently in the Discord, somebody, oh, there was some conversation. I'll have to go back to it. And I thought, oh, this is a great focus for the next video showing our agents doing MCP. I'm blanking on what it was now, but it'll be a great use other than Adobe Premiere. Okay, so done. I think that covers the roadmap that I put on Discord today, and maybe I'll be able to drop into the video now. And maybe it's been on screen this whole time. I don't know. But we have a few things on the drawing board. It's mostly around the... You know what? Maybe I should stop the video and start it so I don't end up with really huge files. And yeah, be right back in a second.